Alright, so tonight is the night I tear into this motor and find out what's all wrong with it. Get rid of a few ugly nasty things on it and keep a few things, and I'll keep you updated as I go along. First thing's going to happen, gonna rip the front accessories off and then the intake, and we'll keep going. Alright, so we got all the front accessories off. Remember guys, bag and tag your stuff. Store it. Alright, water pump's off. I'm going to be throwing this one away because I have another nice newer painted one. Plugs like this and like the one for that, very nice stuff to take out and keep because it comes in so handy. When I was doing this one, I had this one, these kicking around. I was able to plug off all kinds of little ports and stuff. It comes in very handy. So just keep in mind when you're tearing stuff apart what stuff you can keep that's useful, stuff that's not, throw it in the garbage. Don't keep everything. So yeah, let's keep going. Next, I'll take the distributor out, rip the intake off. Alright, so we got the intake manifold off, and you can start to see some of the Valvetrain and stuff right there. Also took the valve covers off. They usually cover this. And you can see all our Valvetrain. So how this works, camshaft down in here. You can see this one's on a lobe. That one's nice and flat right now. They got lobes on one side here. That lobe pushes up on the lifter here, which pushes up on the push rod, which pivots on this pivot ball, pushes on the lifter. So this end comes up, that end goes down, pushes down on the spring here, opens the valves on the inside, and that's how we get our air in and out of the cylinders. Usually with something like this, what you do is I have a nice board made here that sits right in the intake valley. Got it marked front. You would take all these pieces, the lifters, the push rods, the rocker arms, nuts, all that kind of stuff, and you would set it all in this nice so everything's lined up for each cylinder, and keep it all. I have all brand new stuff that's going to go in here, so I'm not doing any of this. This is all going to go in the garbage because you can't sell it. It's a dime a dozen kind of stuff. All this stuff is cheap to buy brand new. So I'm just going to take it all out, throw it in the garbage, and we'll be done with that. Alright, I have a feeling somebody's been into this motor before. One reason is all the goop on the threads and the head and all that kind of stuff on these. Another is these things usually don't come with extremely thin steel shim head gaskets. It's an attempt by some guys to help bump the compression ratio on these, because with these divots in the pistons and these huge combustion chambers and a factory head gaskets, you'd yield right around 7.5 to 1 compression. If you took out the regular head gaskets and went to these, you could maybe get yourself about 8 to 1, which is still terrible. So an easy way to tell how much wear's on the motor, one, is by grabbing these lifters and seeing how easy they come out. If they come out like that, there's not much wear there, because usually with a lot of wear, the bottom side of the lifter here will get a tiny bit mushroomed, and it's a real pain sometimes to pull them out of there. Sometimes you got to push them out the bottom so you don't wreck the bore. So the fact that all those came out like that easy, is a good sign. Another one, if I can get the right angle, I can't really, but there is still some cross hatching in the cylinders here. Alright, so I was looking at the pistons here a little more closely, and some things I noticed is down in here, you can see these little divots and stuff in the piston. Something was loose and rattling around inside there, and that's never good. Luckily, there's no scoring on the cylinder walls or anything like that. And this one, you can see the really clean chunk of piston right there. Usually coolant will do that. So what I did is I went to the head, and that would be this cylinder here with the really clean spot. You can see it was starting to clean up there too. And you can see right there, big chunk of the fire ring missing in there. And a little more down here. So we had a coolant leak. Definitely had a coolant leak. Washing cylinders out, that's never a good thing. And then if I look really closely in here, you can see a couple more little divots and stuff. So something definitely got loose inside that cylinder and bounced around. Who knows what it could have been because everything's gone now. But yeah, little things you notice when you're tearing a motor apart. That's good stuff to look for. Alright, inside the oil pan, I got that off now. You can see all nice and shiny. Never a good sign. That's all metal from what I suspected was connecting rods. So let's give it a check. Nice and tight. Nice and tight. Nice and tight. Not so tight. See that one? That'll do it. Right there. That one's tight. That one's tight. And the last one here. Nice and tight. And nice and tight. So it was just that one down there. That's my bad boy. Decided to let go on me. So this is kind of weird. Coming out of a motorhome, this is only a 2-bolt main, which is very odd. Usually these bad boys would be 4, but I guess they were being cheap or somebody swapped this motor. So there you go. Now we know what the cause was. I pulled the oil pump off. One thing you guys want to do, make sure you keep this bolt. Very hard to find a replacement for that. And the drive shaft, which gets driven off the distributor at this end, you'll notice has a plastic collar that holds it on. That going into a high performance motor, garbage. Get rid of it. It's fairly cheap to buy one of these aftermarket. Comes with a spline, comes with a metal collar over top of it. That way it's much stronger locking into here than just a little tiny plastic piece. That's definitely worth the upgrade. These are kind of cool to keep around just because they're funky shaped. You can use them for weird stuff. But, and on another note, if you've done a rod bearing like what I did, take this thing, drain it a little bit, toss it in there. Garbage. It's got metal and stuff inside it. You do not want that pumping through a rebuilt motor. Buy a new one. Cheap insurance. Another thing to watch when you're rebuilding engines is marking the caps, the rods in the caps for the same one. Everybody, rule of thumb is to always mark it on the side from that cylinder that faces the outboard deck. So the cylinder's on this side, so the numbers face the same way. It's pretty easy to keep everything lined up then. I've already taken number 1 out. I'll just work my way back, keeping everything the same. Caps, you always mark them on the same side like this, so the cap can go back on the same way. And main caps as well. These things are honed and bored and everything to stay in that position. So when you take them off, you'll notice on this one, there's an arrow right there pointing to the front, so you keep everything the way it's supposed to be. So make sure you don't mix any of this stuff up. If you do, you can have a pretty early catastrophic failure on a brand new rebuild. So something to keep in mind, guys. Okay, if you ever wondered what the term spun a rod bearing means, I will show you. This is the bearing from beside the one that really got destroyed. You can see a lot of metal contamination, a lot of scarring and stuff in there. That's where metal particles going through. This tang here keeps these things centered in the rods. What it does, on here, you have this little tang in there. So that tang keeps that bearing from spinning circles in here. Spinning a rod bearing means that tang breaks because of the friction. As you can see on this one, there isn't any. Gets sheared off and it spins in there. This is the good half of the bad side. This is the bad one. So you can see there's a lot of metal there. A lot of metal got deformed and moved and all that kind of stuff. And this rod bearing literally spun inside here. You can see some marking this way. So that's what that means. That rod bearing literally turns circles between the crank and the connecting rod. Then it wears the metal down really thin, really super fast, and that's why you get all the noise. So yeah, I just figured I'd explain that. Some of you guys might not know. That's what happens. That bad boy spins inside there, throws metal, contaminates everything else, like the one beside it especially, and you end up with a wrecked motor. Alright, let's continue tearing these things out. Alright, so we got the harmonic balancer pulled off here, and the timing cover. So one thing to keep in mind, when you're going to try and pull the harmonic balancer off, it takes a bit of force, so this crank is going to want to turn while you're doing it. So what I do is I have an old hammer handle here. So say I use this one too for pounding out the con rods and stuff, so you're not going to damage anything with it. So, but for pulling the harmonic off, what I'll do is I'll just place this in there, and then when you turn on the wrench, the crank will pinch that in there. It's not going to damage anything, and you can pull the harmonic off. No fumbling with two hands or whatever. You just keep pressure on it, keep pulling. It works wonderful. Another thing I noticed is we got factory timing gears in here. Plastic nylon here is meant to keep these things quiet. They are absolute garbage, because if you even think about putting horsepower to these will break and come apart. So the first thing you do with these when you pull them off, throw them in the garbage. They're gone, useless. You're going to build any power, you don't want it. You want to buy yourself a nice double roller, put it in there, then you'd be good to go. So I'm going to take that out and take the crank and cam out and show you something else. Alright, so I got the timing chain off and gone. Little trick for pulling a cam out. Find yourself a nice long bolt that threads into one of the holes. Gives you something to pull on, you can sneak it out of there. I gotta be a little more careful so I don't nick any of the bearings and stuff, so I'm gonna put the phone down for a second here and show you something when I get it out. Alright, so we got the cam out. Checked it for stamping numbers, both ends. There's nothing, which means it's an OEM cam. So I'm gonna show you something that I found out that's kind of fun to do. What you do, make sure you got a garbage cam. It's just something factory, whatever. You drop it perfectly flat on a concrete floor, and it breaks. Always right by the big lobes. Little thing I did with my main caps to keep them all in order in case I reuse these ones. Got all the bolts in there. I just put a big zip tie. I set them down on the floor, the order and the direction they came off, making sure all the arrows are the same. And just hold them together with a big zip tie. That way they can't really go anywhere. The bolts, as long as you keep the main caps the way they are, nobody's kicking your stuff, you're in a nice little contained area, the bolts will be just fine. And then rip the crank out. Gotta be careful, it's gotta come straight up because of the thrust flange down here, if you're at all worried about that. If you're gonna keep a crank around, store it in an upright position. If you lay it down, you will warp it, it will be useless, so keep that in mind, people. And then there we go, we basically have a strip block. I still have motor mounts on there, a couple of minor little things, not a big deal. But yeah, we got her stripped down, and it's time to go out and collect the parts I need. Maybe collect a few more sponsors, because my budget after building the car is pretty freaking tight. So yeah, there we go. Motor's out, disassembled, ready to rebuild and see what parts I have and all that kind of fun stuff. Stay tuned, guys.